Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. You are tuned into how to display and present works on paper, sponsored by Hahnemühle. And I will welcome and turn it over to the man who's going to get us started here from Hahnemühle, Mr. Kevin Graham. Kevin, how's it going?
Great, thanks. It's good to see you, Derek. It's a pleasure to be back at the B&H Event Space. You know, over the past several years, we've talked about all aspects of printing, and we've gotten technical, we've not gotten technical, but I think we left out a huge component, and that's in thanks to our guest, Barrie Bryant. You know, what do you do with the final image? I got an image, what do I do with it? How do I display it? Where do I display it? We were talking about this earlier today with Derek. We got all these images around. I got to do something with them. Well, we're very pleased to sponsor a very dear friend of mine to the event space. I've known Barrie Bryant for almost 30 years, and I can't think of anyone, and I say this with sincerity because he knows me, who's as passionate as this guy is. He is a Renaissance man, who really is. He knows a lot about a lot, and he'll get your heart racing with ideas, and I hope he'll show you some things that you didn't know about displaying your images, and I hope that that's one thing you walk away from. I didn't know that. Barrie's a guy that's going to teach us all the way from Kirby, Wyoming. It's my good friend, Barrie Bryant. Welcome. Good to see you, Barrie.
Hey, thanks to me, Kevin and Derek and B&H and all, and welcome everyone. Yeah, I started my career in photography back in 1989 after being in the Marines for 4 years. And I worked for an architectural photographer and learned a whole lot of stuff because he was real famous and had been in a big museum of modern art exhibition and all that sort of thing. So I got a crash course in the international world of photography very early on when I was in college at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And then along comes Kevin Graham to town as I think he was an Ilford representative selling film and paper. And heck, he said, hey, you better use some Ilford product. And then I was teaching a little bit at the Arkansas Art Center, darkroom techniques, because I was big in the darkroom. I love darkroom work. And Kevin provided us with a P30 processor to do Ilfochrome classics and got us some film. And of course, we had a lot of paper. And of course, all my students used Ilford paper. So I've known Kevin since the early 90s. It's been great. It's been great. And now he's on with Hahnemühle, and I've been using Hahnemühle paper for quite some time now. And I just love their bamboo and their natural line. I was always looking for a not so bright optical white paper. I didn't like optical whiteners in my paper. So I started printing using their bamboo when that came out. And it has that very slight warm tone. And I like that a whole bunch. Not to mention the fact that it's 90% bamboo fiber. So sustainable products are kind of the way we try to go these days. When I got together with my wife in 1994, we decided we needed to leave Arkansas and move to Kirby, Wyoming. We just pointed on the map one day and decided we were getting the heck out of Dodge, out of the South, and to sort of liberate ourselves. She did drawings of people in the Arkansas Delta and had, big shows down in Arkansas. And she just was really ready to move. And it just seemed like a good idea. And Kevin, believe it or not, was at Jackson, Wyoming on Labor Day weekend, which is just this next weekend. He calls me on the phone and says, hey, I'm in Jackson Hole. It's 30 degrees. And I was like, 30 degrees. It was 95 in Little Rock. He said, yeah, did you know there's only 4 people per square mile living in Wyoming? And I hung up the phone with my wife. I said, sweetie, why don't we move to Wyoming? And she says, that sounds like a great idea. So we moved to Wyoming, and she said, you're going to have to start making picture frames for my art. And I thought, good grief, I don't know anything about that. And it's just something I've decided to pick up on. And one thing has led to another. And then in 1996, I was cutting them out of a little tiny 7-inch table saw that I got at a garage sale for $25. We started going to shows. We started winning prizes. That really gets you hooked when you win a $3,000 purchase award. You go, oh no, I got to do this the rest of my life. They love me. Yeah. So anyway, it's been pretty difficult at times, but it's been a great life. And I spent 28 years with my wife until April 27th when she died just recently. And I'm getting better with that. Everything's going okay with that now. But I have a new life ahead of me because now I don't have a collaborator. I was collaborating with her for so long, and everything was so great. And I was making picture frames for all of her art. And that's where I learned about how to display works of art on paper, because she did pastel work, she did collage work, she did drawing, pencil drawings. She used watercolor. She rarely ever used oil paintings unless she did an oil wash. So everything had to be very well protected inside a framed package. So that's something that I studied a whole lot about. And in 1999, I began studying picture frame history. Wow, what a subject. You look at Gardner's art through the ages if you take an art history class in college, or you look at Jansen's the art history books, and you rarely see a picture frame inside those doggone publications. Well, picture frame history, is sort of a category all to itself. And collections in the United States especially, they unified the way collections look. They wanted things to be framed a certain way so that they looked unified in the galleries, and they started mixing up things and throwing away old frames, and then realizing the error of their ways. That happened really in the 90s. They really started recognizing the error of their ways. So what I need to do real quick is I need to share my screen. Can you see my screen share?
Yes, you're good. Looks good.
Good to go. Yes. So, from the beginning of time in photography, they had to find ways to display, and this is a calotype or an ambrotype glass plate photograph that came in a case. So it was all ready for you to display in your home. You didn't have to go figure out how to matter frame it or something like that. It just came this way. And Keith Davis, who is in charge of the Hallmark collection, in Kansas City, he did a presentation last year for Radius Books about the American landscape. And this is one of the images that he showed. About 1895, somebody came along and did a panel photograph of my great grandfather, Abraham Tarpley. And that's what this is right here. It's a specific size, and this frame is made specifically. It's a hammered copper frame from the arts and crafts period from around 1900 in the United States. And you can see how the panel card fits down inside the back. These things were made, one thing was made for the other specifically, so you would be able to frame it quickly and easily. When I started in photography in 1989, I did a big series in Arkansas called the Arkansas Diaries. And I was really ambitious. I wanted to know how to mat, how to frame, how to do everything myself. And I mounted this entire show, or I should say I matted and framed it. The gallery mounted it, the gallery director at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. And I had 40 photographs, and they were all framed and matted pretty much the same way. They were relatively different sizes, 14 by 18s, 18 by 24, 16 by 20, 20 by 24, pretty much standard size photographs and frames. And I printed all of them myself. I'm a big proponent of printing your own work. So many photographers don't print their work. And I think that's one of the things that kept people away from photography back when it was darkroom days. Hey, if you didn't print in the darkroom, who did you get to make your photographs? You had to really know somebody that was good at making prints. And I learned how to make prints, one from Gary K. Wood at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, who was a fantastic printer. And then also from Timothy Hersley in his darkroom there in Little Rock. I looked for ways to display my art any way I could to get it out there in the public eye. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be an artist with a camera. I really wanted to be part of the art community. And I really wanted to share that with the public. And so I took my artwork to small towns, because that's where I was photographing all the time. I took my art into small towns and put it in storefront windows. I got invited to the England Chamber of Commerce banquet in England, Arkansas, which is about 30 miles or 30 minutes outside of Little Rock. And they wanted me to display my work in all the storefront windows, which was a kind of a cool thing. And I just matted them, and I put them into some sort of sleeve. I think these are 16 by 20s, and I put them in a sleeve. They used to make sleeves for a 16 by 20 package, and you could just slide it in there. Then I would have art shows in, restaurants, the alternative spaces, just so I could get something done. You don't usually make good money in those. You can. My wife actually had a show, her first big show in a restaurant called Very Special Tea Room in Little Rock, where she had about 20 drawings, and she got 15 portrait commissions out of the deal. It was a big deal. I mean, that was pretty cool. I mean, it was surprising. It was in the right neighborhood. We had the right guests. I mean, it was just promoted in the right way. But this was a fun thing to do. This is a very prominent restaurant called Vino's in Little Rock. It's still there. It's still operating. They have the best pizza and craft beers in the front, and then they have punk rock and all kinds of stuff in the back. It was really a trip. I did a lot of nice shows back there, photographed a lot of good shows back in the back. So as I said, I started studying picture frame history in 1999. After we had been in the art world out in Wyoming for about 4 years, my wife had started drawing Western themed subjects when she came out here, because they said, you're going to starve if you do fantasy or imaginative realism or whatever. And which is kind of the kind of art she was doing back when she was in Arkansas. She really had gotten tired of doing portrait commissions because she did so many in such a short amount of time. It was really good practice for her to learn how to draw like that. I mean, that's kind of OJT. She already knew how to draw, but you really get good when you do, 40 portrait commissions in several years. It was just unbelievable. Well, we moved out to the West. She started doing Western themed art. And then in 1999, she said, oh my gosh, I really am not so into the Western scene. Even though we were doing well, she said, I really want to go back into imaginative realism. And that's when I decided I'm going to have to start making picture frames that are a little bit more on the edge, a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more interesting. Or maybe I should borrow from the past. I should learn about gilding. And I started learning about gold leaf. And I did that through this very publication called Picture Framing Magazine, which is still being published today. The COVID did not wipe it out. We are so fortunate. Bruce Gurman, who's the publisher of Picture Framing Magazine, and Kimberly Beseda, who is the editor. And now I write and publish with Picture Framing Magazine as well, because I have studied picture frame history and I want to move picture framing forward. And I want people to get as excited about picture frames as I do. And there are some people in our world who still are pretty excited. Some of those people happen to be good customers. And I promise you, if you learn about better picture frames to put on your art, your customers are going to love you for it. You're going to find new customers. You're going to find people who appreciate the frame as much as they do your art. My wife and I traveled sometimes 25 to 30,000 miles a year in our heyday up until about 2015 with our art. And we would be in shows and people would walk in our booth and they would say, look at this painting. And the other person would say, I know, but look at this frame. It was incredible. So I mean, 50-50. People loved the combination, the collaboration. And that's what art and frames are. They're a collaboration. And I learned about that through Picture Framing Magazine. The early issues of Picture Framing Magazine, which started in 1990, are a treasure trove of information. Talk about Gilding, to talk about the history of picture frames, Bill Adair, Robert Kulick, Marty Horowitz, all these guys. In fact, Bill Adair is still alive. Marty Horowitz died a few years ago. Robert Kulick died several years ago. These are pioneers in gilding in this country and in frame making. The Secret Lives of Frames was brought out, an exhibition by Loewy, which is in New York City, Loewy picture framers. And that was at the Butler Institute of American Art. If you want to know about picture frames, go where picture frames are. And that is definitely in a museum. These frames in front of me are by Stanford White, who was an architect in New York. the early 1900s, 1890s and 1900s. Behind me is a Charles Prendergast painting and frame. This was a phenomenal exhibition. I went there in 2007 while we were on tour. We were going to the Ann Arbor Street Art Fair, and we also did Crosby Arboretum in Toledo, Ohio. A couple of good shows that we did on the circuit. And then we went to this Youngstown, Ohio, the Butler Institute of American Art, and viewed this exhibition. Bringing you contemporary time, right now, there's a great man over in Munich, Germany named Werner Murer, and he is a picture frame maker, and he is also a big historian. I think he's taking the world by storm in Europe, especially, taking Europe by storm anyway. I met Werner several years ago on Instagram. I think Instagram has really connected me to some people that are very meaningful to me in the world of picture frames and framing. This is a current exhibition right now, and they wrote an article about the presentation of art, how frames affect the presentation of art. And this is actually an impressionist work that the frame has been removed from. So there were two exhibitions that Werner and his staff, Joanna, has written a blog for Werner, and they published it. It's in German, so you have to translate it if you can't read German, and I can't, which they made fun of me. They thought I was coming along with my German, but I'm not doing so well with my German. Anyway, Werner has studied the Die Bruck artists, and that's how I met Werner. He was writing a book called Unzertrennlich about Die Bruck artists from 1905. And I wrote about that for Picture Framing Magazine, which it was supposed to come out right at the beginning of the pandemic and then got delayed for 2 years. In fact, the exhibitions were canceled, and one worked and the other one was canceled, but everything's going to be okay. Anyway, there were two exhibitions that they wrote about recently about picture frames and of the Impressionists, and how they began to invent new ways of framing. Up until their time, gold frames were the standard. Gold picture frames were just, if you didn't have a gold frame, you didn't get into the salon. You didn't get to exhibit anywhere. And the Impressionists began to make white frames and other painted frames, just very different, like Van Gogh. He painted, in fact, the only surviving frame that Van Gogh actually put on one of his paintings, he painted it himself to look. This is a little statement from Werner's Instagram. What does a frame do to art? Is a frame needed at all? Avant-garde artists such as Edgar Degas or Vincent van Gogh questioned the conventional ornate gold frames and began to develop new types of frames and ways of showing their works. A frame wasn't any longer just a must-have shiny add-on. It became a crucial part of the artwork. Impressionists were driven by the idea to establish a harmony between painting and frame. Their works in frames represented a new kind of vision. And recently, last year, Werner framed 500 artworks for the Edvard Munch Museum in Oslo, Norway. Munch, was a big user of the white, just standard, typical white frame and black frame, which people are using like crazy right now, today. I use an Epson SureColor P800 printer. I think I'm getting ready to use the P900 that I bought 2 months ago from B&H, because this one started banding yesterday. I've been expecting it to go down. It's 6 years old. I have really gotten some killer use out of this fantastic printer. In fact, I've been taking this printer to my classes. I've been teaching classes, a documentary photography project in the last couple of months, and I've been taking this printer to my classes and printing for students right in class. I think that's one of the coolest things. Some people have experience with printing, but for the most part, people don't. And they have loved this, that I just print their images right before their eyes. And I've been printing on the Hahnemühle natural line papers on 13 by 19 and 17 by 22, and even on some longer panoramics up to 60 inches wide. Last year, my aunt, I got a grant from the New York City Artist Corps, and I printed an exhibition for her, and she had an exhibition in J. Hood Wright Park behind her apartment there in Washington Heights, near the George Washington Bridge in New York City. And it's just a simple way to display your art by shrink wrapping your prints. So you take your print and you put a piece of foam core backing, foam core's foam board, and then you put it in a shrink wrapper machine. And I have all of that equipment. I have a mat cutter, a shrink wrapper, and all that sort of thing. And I can do that sort of thing. The shrink wrapper is one of the first things I bought, that and a mat cutter. And she had a show in the park, which was one of the requirements by the Artist Corps. And here's a shrink wrapper. This is one of the first pieces of equipment I acquired when we moved to Wyoming back in 1994. I saw an advertisement for a gallery selling all their equipment, and I called and she said, "Oh, I only have one piece of equipment left. It's a shrink wrapper." I said, "I'll take it." There's a lot that goes into framing art on paper, or framing any art at all. First, to consider what style of frame you're going to make, or what style of presentation you want to show. But then, like a photograph, I use photo corners. I make them myself. In fact, I have cut strips of the bamboo paper, or agave, or the hemp, and I haven't used the new paper yet. What's it called, Kevin? The
sugar cane.
Yeah, right. But I use the paper that I print on to make photo corners. You see the little folded corners? And then I use what's called gummed linen hinging tape from Line Co. And that's a very strong tape. And I use that. Blue bottle has distilled water in it. And I spray my Line Co neutral pH, or I should say my Line Co linen tape with that, and then let it sort of become tacky, or not so wet. It's not wet anymore. I let it become tacky, and then I put it down on the corner. But I also use that Scotch ATG gun right over here. I actually put a little bit of that acid-free double stick tape on the back of that photo corner that I've made right there, so that it holds it in place when I put my tape on. There's the mat cutter to the left there. There's really a lot that goes into this process. Here I have a centering rule, and I'm showing how I'm marking. So there's a 0 in the middle of the ruler, and then I mark the same number places on the left and right side of the ruler. Modern equipment has replaced this old style of framing. The computerized mat cutter from Wizard, and there's some other, Gunnar makes one. There's some other products out there too that, it just makes matting a piece of cake. I'm not a big production house. I don't make 100 a day. I make one every other day, maybe one a week. I'm slow. That's the mat cutter blade that I use. I use a Logan 40-inch. This is the same mat cutter I bought 30 years ago. I really need to upgrade, honestly. Somebody buy me a 60-inch Logan. or how about a Wizard for 25 grand? I don't know. That might be cheap. Here I'm showing you my gummed linen tape that I've sprayed, and I'm hinging the overmat to the backing board. And I use 4-ply rag mat, cotton rag mat. I use from Bainbridge Alpha Rag Art Care. Bainbridge was bought by Crescent last year, or maybe the year before, something like that. I'm not sure about availability of that product now. So those mat boards, you got to buy things like that from a distributor, or from a molding or distributor. And I have a good connection at Montana Molding in Billings, Montana, and have for 27 years. There's a lead weight that I put down in the center of my photograph so that I can hold it in place. I need to get it once I cut that window mat out, I put slide the photograph in there, and then make sure I have that positioned in the appropriate place. This photograph's printed 14 by 21, by the way. It's called Moon Setting Over the Hernandezes. It's a takeoff on Ansel Adams's Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico. There you can see how I have affixed it in place. Here I am signing. I autograph my things. I cut a 1/4-inch border, white border around a lot of my photographs, and And then I autograph it with a very light pencil in the white border and number it. I'm using True View museum glass. True View is sort of the pioneer in the glass world. They make some, awesome products. There's some competitors, but not very many. I think True View sort of like captivated and grabbed the market. This is museum glass, and you can see museum glass shows it's coated. It's got some information on one corner, one edge of it that tells you which side is which, and you have to put it a certain way toward your artwork. It's non-glare, but it's gem clear. It's beautiful stuff, really, but it's a little bit on the pricey side. And here I'm installing my frame that I've made. I made a frame out of Paduke wood. You can't usually get frames anywhere made of Paduke wood unless you make them yourself. And I promise you, if you make a frame like this, people will come up to your art and go, holy moly, what a beautiful frame. They will. They'll say, I just love your art. Beautiful frame too. It's just great. They love the whole package. There, I use a certificate of authenticity. I've never bought certificates of authenticity because I'm in a way very frugal artist. Hahnemühle makes them. I wish they would send me some.
How about we send you some of the holograms, Barrie? Because we
send me some holograms. See, he's got some cool products, and some people don't want to do it all. The paper. If I could make paper, I guess I would, right? Or as Kevin once said, if Barrie could chop down the bamboo to make the paper and make our paper, he'd do it. I love kind of being the do-it-yourselfer sort of guy. As you can see, I do it all here. I'm doing everything from start to finish. I'm putting the wire on there. I'm putting the little felt pads down in the lower left corners. And I have to tell you, I have actually made this frame and sealed it in a shellac, which is called a French polish. That's a very old way of doing a frame or doing any kind of finish, is using shellac. I use a de-waxed shellac called Seal-A-Cell from Zinsser. A lot of people don't know that there's a de-waxed shellac, and it's a very important trade. It's been de-waxed so you can use it with a lot of water-based or oil-based things. It's very, very versatile as compared to their other, which isn't de-waxed. And as you can see, that envelope back there, it has a certificate of authenticity in it that I showed you. I look at that, it seems like a beautiful, beautiful presentation. I tried some other presentations. There's not one way to do things, right? Some people might not want a dark frame. I personally think the dark frame was finally the best way to go, but I didn't have the Paduke at the time I made this one. I had this poplar, and some people like the white on white sort of a appeal. I tried to use I didn't try. I used the siding. I went to the the big box store, and I bought a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of siding paneling that's used for exterior siding of a home. It's very similar to what's probably put on that trailer out there in the open range. By the way, that's adjacent to my studio. That's at the corner of my property in Kirby, Wyoming. It was 20 below zero that day, January 2nd of 2018. I did 2 different versions of that, because this has been a good image, good seller for me, this image. This is sort of a very contemporary or more current piece from May of this year, put in the Paduke frame. Maybe this doesn't need as much of a mat on it as the other artwork does. I did one of those mock-ups in some software online to see how it would look in a room. It's kind of fun to do that, to see how I've never done it until just a few months ago. How about with no frame at all? Maybe, I don't know. I think I like something around it, but it's still possible to show it without a frame. Here we printed my horse 7 feet tall on a prism jet. Now that's a kind of for advertising purposes. It's a prism jet printer. I don't think that B&H, I don't know if they carry a prism jet or the equipment for that, but I wanted to show it because I use a 24 megapixel Nikon D750. And let me go back. Look at the size of the horse in this doggone photograph. This is what I made the 7-foot print from. I made this good print, and then I photographed vertically and got my best lens, my 105 micro Nikkor, and I photographed my print, just the horse in the vertical. And then I put it in Topaz Labs gigapixel and blew it up 6 times. I could have made it 9 feet tall, but they didn't have wide enough paper. It looks phenomenal. I mean, I'm not saying you don't want to buy a better camera than a D750. I wish I had that Leica SL2. That just looks like such a beautiful camera, right? But my budget's on with the Nikon D750 and the others and the software that I can make this thing with. And here's just from Saturday, we had a big reception out at the Arapahoe Ranch. I'm working on this project here in Wyoming, documenting the renovation and the changes that are taking place out at the Arapahoe Ranch here in Hot Springs County. They own 450,000 acres in Hot Springs County. To give you some perspective, Rocky Mountain National Park is 260,000 acres. They own 450,000 acres of ranch land in Hot Springs County. And I'm teaching 4 documentary photography courses right now, as I said, mentioned earlier. And I'm taking my printer to class, and everybody's selecting a community to photograph and their community needs and things like that. And my community turned out to be the Arapahoe Ranch and the changes there. Let me ask real quick if there are any questions before I continue.
Nothing's come through, Barrie. Not yet.
Nothing's come through. Is
But
anybody out there?
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there. So please put your questions to us, and we'll get Barrie to answer them. So
I saw we did actually just have one sneak in right now, Barrie. If you're up for taking one,
I'll take it.
All right, we have the Utah here calling in live from London tonight. Do you have any rules of when or when not to use a picture mat? And if you do use one, what size should you get?
A picture mat. How many rules? Gosh, there's almost no rules. I mean, they publish rules in books and talk about that, but then, everybody's breaking the rules these days. You can see like Charles Douglas, the Gilding studio here on my screen, on our screen right now. I mean, so he's got a wider mat at the top and the bottom than on the sides. That's sort of an Oriental rule, if you want to call it a rule. That's an Orientalism kind of way of framing something. Gosh, there's people today are in photography are just not using mats at all. They're just putting the frame directly around the outside of the image. In fact, Ansel Adams did that. He made screens, and he would do exhibitions and have, just some kind of a little board or screen frame around his screens without any mat work whatsoever. So, Derek, do you think I answered that question?
I would say so. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to a picture framer, typically what happens is they'll lay the artwork down, and then they'll have corners that are of all the actual mat boards, and they'll lay corners down on it and say, okay, do you like this color? Do we like this color? Like framing mat boards, like papers, it's kind of an emotional choice. And Barrie's point about the big picture, do you like this with a mat or do you like this without a mat? Sometimes there's a little bit of, you got to kind of wrestle through that just a little bit.
Yeah. And I always preferred mats on my work. And then recently I got into an exhibition that said no frames larger than 20 by 24 inches. And my print was a 16 by 20. And I thought, that's the only way I want to exhibit that. That just seemed like the size my print needed to be, 16 by 20. So I had to skimp on the mat. And then I thought maybe I should have not used a mat at all. It was just one of those quandaries that you go through. And then there are places where you exhibit and people say, must have at least 2 inches of mat around it. I mean, there's these conventions that people want to hold on to. Must be in a black frame. hey, this isn't a black frame. This is what you see on the screen is a gilded frame by Charles Douglas of Gilding Studio in Seattle. And heck, you know, you can really upscale. You can really upscale, or you can you can go to Michael's too. That's fine. It's fine if that's what what gets the art on the wall for you. Okay. I wanted to show this Charles Douglas piece because he's a master water gilder. I love gilding so much, and I have yet to gild a frame for my photographs. I just, you know, time is my enemy, right? But Charles Douglas has water gilded a frame for somebody's photograph. You know, gilding costs about $2.50 a sheet, and a piece of gold leaf is 3 3/8 inches big, square, $2.50 a sheet. So, you know, a book of 500 sheets, you know, you can get it discounted when you buy 500. You get it at $1,000 maybe, or $900. But if you buy it by the pack. 20 books is a pack of 500 sheets. So if you buy it by the book, it becomes more expensive, like $60 a book, one at a time. Catherine Couturier Gallery in Houston, Texas, shows Wendy Schneider's art. Wendy's, I think she's out of Denver area. And I wanted to show this because Wendy, for one thing, she prints on Kozo paper and then gilds it so that the gilding comes through, and you can see that. It's a beautiful presentation. And the interesting thing about this image right here is you see an Art Nouveau frame from 1900 to say 1930, or you see a dark walnut frame, which is pretty doggone contemporary. People do that a lot, use walnut wood. They're displayed at the same time. Their years are almost 100 years apart. But it's some of the most beautiful art out there. She has been collecting these period frames from the Art Nouveau. So I think she lists them at like 1880 to 1930. I think is what she stated the years are. 1890 to 1930 is what they are. So they're from the American arts and crafts period, honestly. I mean, this is a contemporary artist showing in 100 to 130-year-old frame presentation, and it's a photograph. Here's a painted frame that I made for one of my photographs. I was trying to I had no colored wood, no darker wood, so I wanted to make something for this image of my horses crossing Owl Creek out of the Arapahoe Ranch. And then I reprinted in a new kind of way. I redid my print actually. When I converted from color to black and white in Photoshop, and made as you can see in the image, you can see how the image is so very different. And I prefer this. And I use the Paduke wood, and I just think it's a step up from the paint, even though there's nothing wrong with painting a frame. This is the piece that I sent. It's in the Montgomery Art Festival or Photo Festival today, right now, in Montgomery, Alabama. It's the one that's a 16 by 20, and the frame could not be bigger than 2024, or they wouldn't have accepted it. You know, if your mat is 20 by 24, which is a standard mat size, your frame's going to be bigger than 20 by 24, right? So I had to like scale everything back a little bit. And this is one of the images from my Arkansas diaries, by the way. Mr. Frank's Position. That's Frank Wilson and brother Wesley Russell in Altamer, Arkansas. Here's a Shusugi Ban. That's a burned frame. Japanese technique of burning cedar. Another image from my Arkansas diaries. Here I am making that frame with a torch. That's how the Japanese burn their wood. They use a large torch, you know, in a commercial way. They use a large torch and burn the wood. If you're going to make a black frame, why not make it Shusugi Ban instead of just some old black metal or black wood. Make it crackle, make it a crackle, which you can see on here. Make it into something. My friend Sander van Boekel in Schertikenbosch, the Netherlands, is a contemporary frame maker. He's in his early 40s. He was a chef. He went in to get some frames for something, and he fell in love with framing and decided he would start cooking up gesso and cooking up frame stuff in his frame shop. And he bought into the frame shop, and now he's expanding right now. He makes Dutch style frames. He makes a lot of different kinds of frames. He even has American art coming through his shop. He has a lot of work. He's a hand craftsman. He does everything by hand. He doesn't even spray frames. He likes to do everything by hand. And here he's doing a hand rubbed shellac French polish, which is something I like to do. That's a French, and he's also got a Dutch ripple. So you could frame a contemporary photograph in a Dutch ripple. Dutch ripple is a very popular style, very cool frame from 500 years ago, or 400 years ago. But they still make them today. To Matt, there was the question from the Utah in London. Thanks for calling in. Is there a rule for matting? We had matted this. This was a drawing my wife had done in 1997 or 8. And I had a big mat on it. And then we looked at that, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 years ago, and said, that doesn't need any mat at all. It just needs to be taken away. And that's what I did. I took the mat off and I cut the frame down and made a spacer for the inside so that the artwork would be off of the glass. And that's called the Safe Place Canis lupus. Those are gray wolves. This is an 8-ply mat board. I talked about earlier using a 4-ply mat board. 8-ply is double thick, very thick, and it works very well with a small artwork. This is a print on hand gilded paper that I made. I developed this technique in 2016, 2017, and presented it at the West Coast Art and Frame Expo in January 2017. So I gild the paper, and then I print on the gold. And I use Ink Aid Clear Gloss Type 2 digital ground over my gold so that the ink will adhere to it. You know, the pigment ink in a pigment ink printer has to go on to something. So all the Hahnemühle papers are coated papers with an inkjet receptor, except for their alternative process paper, which is Hahnemühle Platinum Rag. Here's another, it's a drawing my wife did. This was actually a photograph of mine. This is a drawing my wife did that I put on gold. And here I am showing just deskewing the gold. That's called deskewing. Those are skewings, little gold pieces are skewings after I've gilded the paper. Glazing, True View has got some beautiful glazing called Optium Museum Acrylic. It's anti-reflective, but it's gem clear. It's anti-static. It's scratch resistant. You remember plexiglass is, I mean, you pull the plastic off the face of plexiglass and, oh, there's already a scratch on it. You're like, how in the world will that happen? Well, Optium Acrylic, they're so careful with it. It comes so well packaged, but you pay a price. You buy a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, costs, I haven't bought any in a while, but it used to cost me $800 and something dollars. That's wholesale now. If you were to go and buy it from a framer, they would probably charge you up to three times, because they've got the responsibility of keeping the product. They've got the the burden of having these things, these inventories, the burden of cutting it, maybe cutting it wrong. Oh my gosh, heavens to Murgatroyd. That little blue cutter right there is a $5 job you get from Lowe's or Home Depot. Because it's blue, it probably came from Lowe's. And you score over and over repeatedly when you cut acrylic, and it makes a real high squeaky noise. And then you break it, click, and you have the right size. My wife got into doing collage and assemblage after 2015, and I used what's called TrueView Conservation Clear, which is 99% UV. Oh, by the way, that's what the museum acrylic is, also 99% UV. It's the best glazing on the market. This is a step down from that. It's not anti-reflective, but my wife wanted to collage onto the glazing surface, and so this was a work in progress at that time. And she collaged those fairies onto a drawing of her model. Here I am framing a panorama. I like to do the panorama thing. This is a 60-inch wide mat. You know, mat boards come 32 by 40, 40 by 60. Some come in 72. I don't know if they're 40 by 72 or 48 by 72 maybe. And then there might be some even larger ones, 48 by 96. Very few in that category. Foam core is the same way. The framing industry tries to keep things the same sizes so that, you know, oversized. 32 by 40 is regular size. Oversized is 40 by 60. Takes 3 times as long to actually work with materials when they're oversized. It really takes a lot of time. And this is a panorama. I love printing panoramas. You don't have to have a big printer. I have a 17-inch wide printer. I can print a 60-inch wide panorama. I could print one longer than that if I had a way to display it, right? But I love doing panoramas and then making my frames. And what I've done is I've cut 2 pieces of steel, pieces of, I don't know if it's 1/8 inch, maybe it's 1/8 inch steel, and attached them into the centers of the large frame so that it would keep those boards, you know, those boards together so they wouldn't warp, bend, and pop the artwork out of the rabbet. This is called the rabbet down in here. And I've strung my wire across that to shorten the span of the wire. This was oak flooring from a Lutheran church parsonage. They were renovating, and I saw the markings on the back of the board, which is the underside, you know, never seen until it was pulled out. And I thought, what a cool thing to have on the front side of my frame. I wanted that to be part of the front side of my frame. And so that's the way I cut it and showed it. Here I am holding that sucker. And that's a panorama of Kirby, where I live, just down the street from me here, overlooking the river, looking toward the Bridger Range, where Jim Bridger came through. That's the Bighorn River. This is at my neighbor's house. I went over and took a photograph of it in my neighbor's house, who owns that. Lou Peralta, Mexican artist. I think she lives in Mexico City. I mean, what a beautiful way to present your art, in a basket that was woven by Eva Salazar, who's a Native American artist. Dawn Surratt, another one of my favorite artists out there working in photography. Look at how she's done all of her things. I mean, she has standard prints, but she also has these environments that she creates. I love the idea of creating a new environment for your art. She teaches workshops, by the way. A young child decided, I like 4 different colored moldings because my artwork is colorful. This is thinking outside the box. And this was put together by the Frame Shop in Pocatello, Idaho. And I saw it and loved it. Karsten Steinhausen did a limited edition, had this specific wood, decided he would do a limited edition of this beautiful silverback, and sold out of them pretty quickly. But it's a different way to present your art. Now, where's the matting there? There's no matting at all. You got this piece of wood, this beautiful dark wood. Fritz Konzen's an auction house, contemporary, selling old frames. That's an old frame with a contemporary photographic work of art. Again, back to Werner Mueller, tearing it up in Europe right now, doing a lot of good things with picture frames. Look up Werner Mueller Rahmen. That's his website, Werner Mueller Rahmen in Munich, Germany. In Oslo, Edvard Munch started doing white frames and black frames, just regular simple frames, and influenced, I mean, all of us. They're still doing it, right? We're still doing it, making a lot of black and white frames. And Edvard Munch is a pioneer of that. Here's a contemporary way to show a photograph. It's just been tacked to the wall. Now this is Albrecht Fuchs. That's no small name in photography. This is in a museum. Here's another big museum work by Barbara Probst in the little white frame. What a great way to, I mean, a lot of people love white frames now. Here's a wooden frame. And then on to my wife's artwork, collage work. She did a lot of drawings that I made prints of on Hahnemühle papers. And then she decided in 2015 she wanted to do collage and assemblage. And I said, hey, I've got all these prints, these seconds and thirds that, you know, they're too good to throw away, right? Got all these prints in the closet. Why don't you, oh, she was so excited. She said, yeah, I'll cut all those old prints up and I'll use images from my old art and make new art. So she would do drawings, new drawings, and then add things to those drawings, add like prints from those prints to those new drawings. And that helped me to get outside of the box where the frame's concerned. I carved and gilded this frame, you know, with a little help from the Dutch auricular style, which means of the ear. And you can see it becomes frame as content. It finishes the hat. I love this drawing she did on Hahnemühle nostalgia paper. That's in their fine art line. It takes and receives charcoal very well. And then she wanted me to mount it to a canvas for her so that she could actually put an acrylic glaze over it. And then she collaged all of these birds and then added some, I think she probably added some gold and silver to them to touch them up a bit. And of course I carved the frame. This is a carved frame for, you know, I mean, I just did it 2 years ago for her drawing. This is what it looks like in the studio, my studio. I really miss doing this. I have a couple of these frames that I designed. This is a Dutch auricular and Art Nouveau style. See the Dutch auriculars here of the ear, and this is sort of an Art Nouveau style. This frame style works very well when it's tall, long, and skinny. This is gesso. I have to gesso. I make my own gesso out of rabbit skin glue and water and calcium carbonate. Sometimes I use calcium sulfate, which the Italians used, depending on where you are. This is gilding with 23 karat gold. This is my wife's and my last collaboration, the Purple Forest. We called it, that's the shortened name for it. This was recently featured in Picture Framing Magazine. I call it a cathedral forest frame. Where are you going to get a frame like that unless you make it? Unless you know somebody you can collaborate with, maybe. The drawing is on Hahnemühle nostalgia paper, but it's also got water media on it. And so I dry mounted it to a backing board, a 4-ply mat board, by using buffer mount. Here's another artwork that I'm dry mounting using an old dry mount press. The perfect mount is just a piece of release paper. That's a totally different product altogether. Here's a frame that extends the drawing. She drew on top of a piece of paper. It's actually a commercial piece of paper that had those birds in the clouds. And she did the drawing of her model. And then I extended that out on the frame and gilded the outer edge. This is me gilding the outer edge with the Koldner Instacol system and Gesto Manetti, probably 22 karat. It says deep patent, 22 karat patent leaf. There's two kinds of leaves: loose leaf, which is surface, and patent leaf, which is affixed to the paper. And you can see in the background how the leaf is stuck to the paper. We gilders use that a lot for gilding in the wind outdoors. Here's my wife and her model and a drawing on Honolulu nostalgia in a frame that I carved, gilded, and then painted. Here's some shavings. One time somebody wanted to buy my shavings. Anyway, here's a Tondo frame. I wanted my wife to draw round for the longest time, and she refused forever. She says, I don't think round. Then she decided one day that she would draw, says, I'm going to do an Alice in Wonderland series specifically for your round pictures and your works of art on gilded paper. And she did 8 in the series. And this is me, the Mad Hatter, in a frame that I have done with egg tempera. This is egg tempera. I make my own egg tempera with an egg yolk and pigment, and I paint it on, and then I scratch it away. That's what sgraffito is. Here I am gilding the paper for that. Ink aid for the digital ground. Here I am gilding a pretty large frame. It had more than 80 sheets of gold on it. 80 times 2 to 250 a sheet. Here I am turning that frame on a lathe. Think round. Do some round artworks, y'all. How about that? Here we are at an art show in Estes Park, taken by our dear friends Debbie Timer and Ted from Gainesville, Florida. We had an exhibition in Rock Springs, Wyoming. It's a very wonderful community fine arts center there. Here I am and my wife, probably I don't remember now exactly, 2017, 2018 maybe. I carved and gilded that frame. That frame actually, there's a copy of, or the real one is in the Metropolitan Museum. And I drew from a book, because I have 30 books on picture frame history. And I drew from a book and transferred to the wood and then carved it, having never seen the frame. And I made the frame. There was no artwork in the frame that the Metropolitan has. They don't know what it was made for, possibly a mirror, let's say 1640 in Italy. And I say that the frame was made for my wife's drawing. Go Free is the title of that drawing. It was a very popular drawing. And this is a project I'm working on now. This is my last image. This is a Thomas Molesworth style picture frame. This is something I'm doing with my classes. We're framing a lot of the photographs that my participants are taking, and we're going to frame them in these frames that I put them together in my studio, and I take them to Makerspace 307 in Riverton, which is a wonderful place where they have all this equipment. And I have a lot of equipment too, but they have a CNC computerized router, and I'm routing these first, and then I'm bringing them back and I'm carving out the extra details. And then I'm finishing them in shellac and painting them. So this is Thomas Molesworth, cowboy high style. He was the inventor of cowboy high style. Look him up. 1930s in Cody, Wyoming. The Shoshone Furniture Company was the name of his company. And he did a lot of work in our area, and people are crazy for Thomas Molesworth. Very valuable furniture, $30,000 for a chair. But they never really talk about the picture frames. I'm writing about these picture frames for Picture Framing Magazine, which will come out sometime, probably in the winter. My article's due October 7th. Any questions?
A bunch.
Oh, yeah.
That's a
have-
loaded question right there.
Yeah.
Kevin,
right,
he said any questions. He said any question. Barry, we got a bunch here. Kevin, I'm gonna let you dig into the bag.
Yeah. Yeah, Barry, if you might maybe want to unshare your screen here. So what I've done is I mean, Barry's very accessible. I posted his website twice, so you can you can email Barry directly if we haven't hit them all, because we're going to run out of time. And Barry and I talked about this. There's a lot to pack in. Maybe next time we should do part 1 and part 2. I don't know. So I'm just going to hit on a few of them. Charles Zook from Little Rock, Arkansas.
Hey,
We got to give a shout out to Charles Zook. Hey Barry, what's the budget range for a photo quality printer for printing one's own photos of a quality that is worthy of selling? Also, how long do the colors in digitally printed pieces last? Because both of us can answer this.
oh yeah. Hey Charles, thanks for attending and thanks for asking. It's good to have you. 500, 700, 900, 1200. The range is very small. Actually, it's not very expensive. It does seem like it can be to somebody who might be pinching pennies or something like that. But yeah, that's not very expensive for what they can produce. It's amazing. And what was the other part of that?
Well, the other part was about how long can colors on digital.
Oh yeah, the Henry Wilhelm research. They started doing research on pigments and dyes and photographs and Fuji and Kodak, Milford and all that sort of stuff. And they discovered, now Epson and Canon's 200, 400, they have pigmented inks. The inks are pigmented. They're not dye based like the original Iris Giclée prints were 20 years ago and Roland printers. They're amazing. It's amazing. They're,
right.
Yeah. But again, if you protect them with better glazing, like the TrueView Optium or the museum glass, that's 99% UV. You got a really good product there that lasts for a long, long time.
Right. Pigmented inks. Decide if you want desktop or wide format. Pigmented inks, pigmented inks, pigmented inks. We keep saying that. Where it's stored and how it's stored. Do you put it behind glass? There was another question in here about do you always put behind glass or something that related to that? If you decide you don't want your image behind glass for whatever reason, we suggest at Hahnemuhle that you spray it. It will give it some UV as an inhibitor. It will protect it. And that's for some of the papers that maybe you want that sheen to show. So I hope that again, if we don't get to everybody's question, we'll do one more quick because I see Derek who's ready to go, and I understand that we want to be respectful of time. I have posted Barry's website. Be sure and let him know. Barry, one more question because you've talked about this and we talked about this earlier when we did. Mark NF writes, I've always mounted my prints without corners. What's the advantage of corners? Thanks. And this will be the last one. So.
Let me understand how to mount them without corners. So maybe you tape them at the top with a T-hinge. I don't know. Some people have done that. I've done works on paper that way. But one of the problems you have when you do something like that is it can buckle, or it can create a little bitty dome like over the surface. That's a common way for people to frame things. But I'm not sure I understand exactly how unless you have it sitting along the rabbet, have the paper sitting along the rabbet. Now, that's possible. You can use frame space or by Frame Tech. I think there's this spacer that you can use. You don't even have to have an overmat really on it. But you have to have a wider border on your print, of course. And I'm going to do some things like that because these Molesworth style frames, they're tighter. I've got a tighter tolerance anyway, so I don't have as much space to mount to matte pictures with. So I'm making a little bit wider border on them. I hope that answers the question.
So as I said, I've saved the chat. I'll forward the chat to Barry. So if we didn't get to you, it's because Barry, as I said, got everybody's heart going. And now we're going to go out and buy framing equipment, Derek included, and pick up all the artwork he's got laying around behind him, so we can do it. So, as usual, Barry, thank you.
Hey, it's been great. I've loved it, and excuse me for not giving 5 more minutes for more questions. I just
no worries. Hey, we got all the information, right?
Good.
That's what counts.
Anybody can email me. You can email me. You can call me. My information, even on my Instagram, on my biography, there's information there about how to get in touch with me. You can get on my website. I have to admit, I've got my information there, all my stuff, email, phone number, address, what I like to eat, what I like to drink when we go out to the restaurant.
In
I'll leave
Kirby,
it-
Wyoming. Kirby, Wyoming.
I think what we need to do, Kevin, is we need to just do an open session one day. We get you and Barrie on there and we just
think
say, have at it. Let the people ask questions and we just do a live Q&A.
I think we did. One more comment about Wyoming, and then I know we have to go. So it's true. I did call him when I was in Jackson Hole, and I said, "What a beautiful." So they moved there, and he said, "We're moving there," and I said, "Oh my God, what if they don't like it?"
Yeah, we
What
wouldn't
if they
be
don't
talking
like
right
it?
now, buddy.
So don't anybody ask me about where I am, because if you move there and you don't like it, I'll have bad karma. Wyoming
Eee.
is a beautiful state. It really is. So anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, really. It's an amazing state to see. It's unbelievable, really. I think most people like to come and go and get back to wherever they're from, because the winters can be brutal. They're not as brutal as they used to be, but 20 below, we get some 20 belows for quite a while, but you know, and it's dark and cold and oh my gosh. Anyway.
Thank you, Barrie.
You're welcome. Hey, it's been my pleasure. Derek, I've had a great time. I love B&H, man. I got a 200, 500 Nikkor from you guys here not too long ago. I am loving that lens. Good grief.
It's a great place to spend money, right?
I'm here to tell you, I know. My aunt was always
I bought
spending
a
money.
bag
She's like,
and-
oh, I've been down to B&H again. Oh,
I bought a bag on Sunday and it showed up on my doorstep on Monday.
that's the thing. 2 days later, I had this big behemoth lens. And I thought, oh, I'm scared to even take it out of the box. But it came so fast, I had to get on with it. So anyway, love it.
Yeah, you know why that is, right? That's because
What?
you don't want buyer's remorse, right? The quicker the
No, you
product
don't
gets
want-
there,
yeah, right.
the quicker the product gets there, you can't question spending the
You
money
know,
on it.
I don't know. There's so many facets to frame making, framing, art, and all that. There's got to be that many facets to your business too, to where you have to. I mean, you really have to bend over backwards in so many directions, don't we all? We all need to. We all need to take care of one another the best we can. So I appreciate it, you guys. You guys are great.
Oh,
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Barrie, and of course, Kevin.
welcome.
Kevin always brings us wonderful guests, wonderful topics. So,
Thanks.
Kevin, thank you as always, and Hana Mula for sponsoring this wonderful event. But you guys know where I'm about to go with this. It's all the time we have for today. Another rendition of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. We'll catch y'all next
Bet.
time.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.